Hey guys, since I don't get to spend a lot of time with you, I wanted to do a little lesson covering some of the defensive schemes that we're going over. A little bit of this is going to be a review. Some of this is going to be new that we're going to work on at our scrimmage on Saturday before we actually do some live situations. So what we were talking about this last week was defense. And so if we had a runner coming up and he inevitably gets tackled, we're going to have a ruck situation. Okay? Let's pretend for this scenario that they maintain possession and they have the ball, and it's going to be starting right here, signified by that. They line up with their offense in a nice back line, and we need to match up against them. But the first thing we need to do is we need to establish that post position, signified by this guy right here and on both sides of the ruck. Okay? His first priority is to make sure that he's behind the last foot of our ruck so that we're not getting offsides. Okay? The next thing he needs to make sure to do is to cover this inside gap. The post player is in charge of this inside gap. That's his main priority. Okay? After that ball, if the ball comes around here, he's going to make the tackle. If the ball gets thrown out here, he can come up and then veer out and hover into this territory, making sure that nobody cuts back. Subsequently, something else that he does for our team is he establishes the offsides line that everybody else can now see. Okay? And it extends all the way across the field, making it a lot easier for the rest of our defenders to make sure that they're not getting offsides. Okay? So the post position, ensure nobody's going to attack that inside gap. The next obligation, or the next priority, make sure to signify where the offsides line is. Okay? Now, the part that we're going to get into here that I really wanted to talk with you guys about is the roles and responsibilities of each of these defenders. As you'll notice, they're each directly across from the person that they're covering. Each offensive player has a defender covering them right now. Okay, we want to play man-to-man. We want to ensure that everybody is going to get tackled if they attack into our side of the field. So, this guy, the lead defender, his first role before anything happens is to ensure that he's behind the post, and then to look down to ensure that we have defenders covering and nobody's in front of him. Okay, so he's going to yell, "On me," and the rest of the defenders are going to tell him that they're ready and in position. The next thing he needs to look at is where his defender is. And his first responsibility is to attack this offensive player. Okay? So he's going to come up. If this player doesn't pass, he doesn't do anything, then he makes the tackle, we're all good. If this player decides that after he gets the pass, he's going to pass it out here, we now need to reestablish the lead defender's role. And his second role is to cover this territory right here. Okay? The gap in between these two players. Sometimes teams will have a player that scoots from the inside and inserts right here. Or they may have a player that's back here that will insert into this gap. Or they could have a player that's out here that decides to insert in this gap. That's why it's very important that after this player passes to this player, that we still cover this gap. Now, as you're sliding out here, and you don't see anybody in this territory, nobody in this territory at all, we can then call for a push. Okay? The third role of the lead defender, if 1 is no longer an option, or is no longer a necessity, if 2 is no longer a necessity, then this position becomes the necessity. Now we're able to first go here, second, look at this, and thirdly, look at that defender. By doing that, we can free these defenders to move outward. And these defenders are going to work exactly the same way as the lead defender. Their first role is to attack this player. So if we go from here and we pass out, and then we pass out again, okay, and this player makes the tackle, well then we're all good. If this player decides to pass out, then now this defender needs to look into this position here, okay, and defend that gap. If nobody's present in this gap and we've passed here, then he's able to push out here and push this defender out further, covering this major gap on the outside of everyone. So, by the lead defender coming up, guarding the gap, realizing that nobody here is a threat anymore, he can now push this player, who now is coming up here, can now shift to the second position. If nobody is here, if nobody comes from behind or from the inside or outside, then he can now push to this offensive player, allowing this defender to come up, who has their one position here, and second position, the outside gap. Okay, we're going to do one last demonstration of this all happening at once. Okay, so we have the post here. His job is to cover this territory. Number one option is to cover the inside. Okay, but let's say this ball gets passed out and everybody says shoot. So he comes up, and then his second role is to cover this territory here. Make sure nobody's going to be able to cut back in. Okay? At the same time that all of this is happening, these three defenders are coming up to defend the people that they are on man to man. These are their primary roles. If the ball gets to here, and before we get to him and make the tackle, if we make the tackle, good. No more offense for them. If we're still coming up, we've only gotten to here, and they decide to pass out, this person is no longer a risk to us. So we must now change our trajectory and move out. But before we can go straight to him, we have to guard and defend this territory, our second territory. So as of this moment right here, he passes to this second offensive player. We're covering this gap. So this player, in a sense, covers this area here. Alright? Now, let's say there was a player that was lingering back here. But he doesn't decide to go into this gap. He's still moving outward. Okay? If that's the case, and we come and we see that no one is here, we are now allowed to push and tackle this player. When we yell push, it allows the player in this position to now move out and cover this territory here, defending that gap. Well, this player, seeing that somebody's covering that gap, decides that he doesn't want to go to that gap anymore. He's going to continue moving outward. If we see this happening, and we see that this player is going out, we need to push in order to defend this. So this player can now change his trajectory and cover this player. By yelling push, it allows this defensive player now to change their direction and cover the final territory, which is this outside area, which, because they had a player up here that shifted all the way out, now that is his responsibility to tackle this outside player. So that's our defensive scheme all put together.